Hello, welcome to Secret Zone. Subscribe and turn on notifications for stories you won't forget. Ethan Miller stood alone on the balcony of his apartment, the soft glow of the city lights flickering one by one as the sun dipped below the horizon. The warm orange and pink hues painted the skyline, reflecting off the glass buildings and streets below, while a gentle breeze brushed against his face. He swirled the red wine in his glass, letting it catch the last rays of sunlight, and tried to quiet the exhaustion that had settled into his bones after an entire week of back-to-back client meetings, calls, and presentations. At 40 years old, Ethan had built a successful career as an independent financial consultant, and while the work was rewarding, it demanded precision, patience, and an analytical mind that never truly switched off. This week had been particularly grueling. Clients pushing for increasingly complex solutions, deadlines that never seemed to end, and the constant pressure to stay ahead of the competition. Yet, standing here, looking at the city lights shimmering like tiny stars on Earth, he allowed himself a rare moment of peace. He thought about the life he had built alongside his wife, Ava Johnson. 10 years had passed since they had tied the knot, a decade filled with love, trust, and shared dreams. Ava, 36, was ambitious, elegant, and confident, working as a corporate events coordinator at a high-profile agency that catered to some of the wealthiest and most influential clients in the city. She had always been impeccably put together, with chestnut hair perfectly styled and a smile that could light up any room. Their marriage, by all appearances, was the kind of relationship people envied. A careful balance of love, respect, and trust, where each day built upon a foundation of shared commitment. Ethan's mind wandered over the small routines that had made their marriage feel so secure. Sunday morning coffee on the balcony, quiet dinners at home, weekend drives to nearby parks, in the way they always remembered each other's birthdays and little milestones. He felt the weight of these memories like a soft anchor, grounding him in a life that, until now, had felt safe and unshakable. But even in these quiet moments, a small unease had begun to creep in. He noticed it in Ava's distant smiles, in the way she sometimes lingered over her phone a little too long, or came home later than usual, with excuses about extended client events or last-minute emergencies. Ethan had always trusted her implicitly. Trust was the very foundation of their marriage. He never questioned, never doubted, never imagined that the woman he loved could harbor secrets that would one day shake the very life they had built together. Tonight, as he took another slow sip of wine, Ethan felt a subtle tension in the air, as if the city itself held its breath, waiting for something he could not yet name. The glass door behind him slid open quietly, and there she was, Ava, stepping onto the balcony. Her movements hesitant, her eyes red and swollen, her usual composed elegance replaced by a vulnerability he had rarely seen. Ethan turned to face her, instinctively sensing that something had changed. The warmth in the air now felt heavier, charged with unspoken words. Ava's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her own glass, and she avoided looking directly into his eyes, as if searching for courage in the city lights around them. Ethan's stomach tightened, a silent alarm sounding in the pit of his gut. Yet he remained calm, steady, and silent. The world seemed to slow as Ava's voice broke through the quiet, delicate and wavering. "Ethan, I need to tell you something." Her words hung in the air, fragile yet heavy, carrying with them a truth he was not prepared to hear. He placed his wine glass carefully on the side table, his eyes never leaving hers, his mind bracing for the revelation that would alter everything. Even before she spoke again, Ethan could sense the contours of the storm about to hit the confession that would test not just the strength of his heart, but the foundation of 10 years of love and trust. This moment, suspended in time between the fading sunlight and the sparkling city lights, was the calm before the inevitable heartbreak. Ethan Miller had always believed that life, when built carefully and thoughtfully, could be steady, predictable, and safe. Standing alone on the balcony of his apartment, the city lights twinkling like distant stars, he allowed himself to breathe deeply for the first time in a long week. The week had been brutal, long meetings with demanding clients, spreadsheets and presentations that required every ounce of his focus, and constant calls that never seemed to end. At 40, Ethan had mastered the art of control in his career, working with mid-sized companies to restructure investments and optimize cash flow. His work required precision, patience, and an analytical mind that refused to rest even after the most exhausting days. He had applied these same qualities to his marriage, or so he thought. 10 years of marriage with Ava Johnson, a woman 30s, had been filled with what most people would call perfection. Mutual respect, trust, and deep love. Ava was ambitious and elegant, a corporate events coordinator at a prestigious agency catering to high-profile clients. Her chestnut hair, always flawlessly styled, framed a face that carried both warmth and intelligence. Her smile, when it appeared, could light up any room. Their life together had been a careful balance of career, love, and shared routines that created a sense of security Ethan rarely questioned. Sunday mornings on the balcony, with coffee, quiet dinners, weekend drives, and celebrating birthdays or small milestones together, all of it reinforced a foundation built on trust. And yet, tonight, something felt different. There was a subtle tension, almost imperceptible, in the way Ava had been distant over the past few weeks. She had been coming home later than usual, citing work emergencies, vendor meetings, and last-minute events. Ethan had never questioned her explanations. Trust, after all, had always been their bedrock, but a quiet unease had begun to creep in. A whispered in his mind that something was not quite right. He sipped the red wine in his glass, trying to soothe the tension in his chest, when the balcony door slid open. Ava appeared, hesitating for a moment before stepping onto the balcony. Her eyes were red and puffy. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her own glass. Ethan turned to face her, and an unspoken heaviness filled the space between them. He could sense immediately that this was not about a missed deadline or a work emergency. There was something heavier, something that would change everything. Ava's voice, soft and breaking, finally pierced the quiet. "Ethan, I need to tell you something." The words, though gentle, carried the weight of a truth that Ethan's heart instinctively feared. He set his wine glass down, silent, allowing her the courage to speak, even as a knot formed in his stomach. The city lights below continued to blink, oblivious to the human drama unfolding above, while Ethan braced himself for the confession that would shatter the life he thought he knew. Ava took a trembling breath, her hands shaking as she tried to steady herself. She could barely meet Ethan's eyes, and every word felt like it had to be dragged from her lips. "Ethan, I've been seeing someone else," she whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's mind, trained to process numbers, risks, and logic, now had to process heartbreak. He said nothing, remaining calm, his face an almost unreadable mask, though inside his chest a storm of disbelief and hurt raged. "His name is Liam Carter," Ava continued, the tears now streaming freely. "I've been with him for 7, almost 8 months, and I'm pregnant. I need to be with him." Each word fell like a stone, shattering the life Ethan had believed in. He let her speak, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. He remembered every missed dinner, every late return home, every small excuse she had given for her absences. Each one now took on a chilling new meaning. "How could you?" Ethan finally asked, his voice low but steady, not with anger, but with a controlled sadness that made Ava's tears deepen. "How could you betray 10 years of marriage?" Ava sobbed, unable to answer, her voice breaking into pleas and regrets. Ethan asked the questions he had to hear: where they had met, how it started, how she could continue living a lie in their shared home, and how she could justify using their joint resources to support a relationship he had never known existed. Ava admitted everything, from secret coffee meetings to weekends spent in another city. Her explanations were filled with guilt, and yet they were also a painful reminder of how much deception had been carefully planned. Ethan, for all his heartbreak, never raised his voice. He did not smash his glass. He did not shout. He did not argue. He simply listened, processing each revelation like a complex formula, weighing the facts, calculating the emotional toll, and silently acknowledging the betrayal. In those moments, the city skyline seemed distant and unfeeling, while his world collapsed in silence. By the end of her confession, Ava's exhausted, tear-streaked face begged for forgiveness, for understanding, for some path to repair what had been broken. Ethan remained silent. He knew one thing with clarity: nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, Ava left. She packed her belongings, her movements heavy with shame and regret. Ethan watched quietly. The apartment now echoing with the emptiness of a life that had abruptly shifted. The rooms, once full of laughter, shared memories, and intimacy, now carried the weight of betrayal in every corner. Ethan spent the following days in a haze of silent reflection. He revisited old photographs, letters, and small mementos, memories of vacations, birthdays, and quiet evenings that now seemed both precious and cruelly ironic. Yet, despite the ache in his chest, he refused to wallow. He focused on himself, on his work, on rebuilding his world around him. He pushed himself harder at his consultancy, extended his hours, and filled every free moment with productivity. He joined the gym, reshaped his physical routine, updated his wardrobe, and embraced a small but steady sense of renewal. The betrayal, while painful, had sparked a resilience that had lain dormant within him. Weeks later, he met Amanda at a networking event, a 20-year-old partner at an auditing firm with an honest smile and a warm, grounded presence. She was intelligent, respectful, and patient with Ethan's pace of life. Slowly, carefully, he allowed himself to engage, to laugh, and to feel again. The new relationship was a balm, a reminder that the heart could heal and trust could be rebuilt, even if in a different form. Life, Ethan realized, was moving forward whether he embraced it or not. He began to see that strength, dignity, and the courage to continue were more valuable than bitterness, resentment, or the shadow of what had been lost. The betrayal remained, a scar etched into memory, but it no longer defined him. 3 months later, fate orchestrated a chance encounter. Ethan was at a shopping mall, running errands and enjoying a rare weekend break, when he saw Ava. She looked different, tired, simpler, older in ways that months of emotional stress could etch onto a person's face. She froze for a moment upon seeing him, tears welling in her eyes. Her life, the one she had chosen with Liam Carter, had not turned out as she had imagined. She approached cautiously, words trembling. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. Everything went wrong. He betrayed me. I'm all alone." Ethan's face remained calm, composed, and steady. He did not speak. He simply looked at her, seeing the woman he once loved, the person who had once been his entire world, now humbled by her choices and the consequences she had invited. In that quiet moment, he understood something profound. He had healed, moved forward, and found his own happiness, separate from the heartbreak she had caused. Life had given him a second chance, and he embraced it fully. He finally spoke, softly, almost to himself. "It's too late now. I'm happy. My life, my work. I am moving forward." Ava's shoulders slumped. She realized that the bridge she had burned could not be rebuilt, that the years of betrayal had left their mark irreversibly. Ethan walked away calmly, each step affirming his resilience, strength, and determination to continue building a life of dignity, love, and trust. That night, standing again on the balcony where so much had begun, he raised a glass quietly to himself, to healing, to new beginnings, and to the truth that no heartbreak, no matter how profound, could define the path of a determined and resilient heart. Ethan Miller stood once more on the balcony of his apartment, the city lights twinkling beneath him like 1,000 tiny stars. The wind was gentle, carrying with it the faint hum of the city below. But up here, in this quiet moment, it felt as if time itself had paused. He lifted the glass of wine in his hand and gazed at the horizon, remembering the nights of laughter, the quiet Sunday mornings, and the decade he had spent building a life filled with love and trust. Those memories, once sources of pain, now felt like treasures, reminders of a life he had lived fully, deeply, and without compromise. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the sleepless nights, and the long empty evenings, they had all shaped him, but they no longer defined him. Ethan realized something profound. Life, no matter how cruel at times, always offers a path forward. The pain he had carried was real, but it was also temporary. What remained now was resilience, strength, and the courage to embrace happiness on his own terms. He thought of Ava, standing alone in a world of her own making, grappling with choices that had left her lost and vulnerable. And while he felt a trace of sorrow for her, It was tempered by the certainty that he had reclaimed his life. He took a slow sip from his glass and felt the warmth spread through him. Amanda's smile came to mind, gentle, honest, unassuming, a reminder that love, when rooted in respect and truth, could still flourish. He understood now that the heart could heal, even after betrayal, and that happiness was not a gift given by others, but something to be nurtured and chosen for oneself. Ethan set the glass down and breathed deeply, the night air filling his lungs, cleansing the last traces of doubt and regret. The city lights continued to shimmer, indifferent to the stories that unfolded below. But for him, this moment was a celebration, a quiet toast to new beginnings, to the lessons learned through pain, and to the inner strength that had carried him here. He smiled softly, not the broad, easy smile of someone without scars, but the deep, satisfied smile of someone who had survived, grown, and reclaimed his life. "Here's to truth," he whispered to himself, "even when it hurts. Here's to life, even when it breaks us. And here's to moving forward, stronger than before." He turned from the balcony, walking back into the apartment with a calm certainty. The past would always be a part of him, a chapter in his story, but it no longer held him captive. Tonight, he slept, not as a man broken by betrayal, but as a man renewed, at peace, and ready for whatever the future held. And as the camera slowly pulled away from the balcony, capturing the sparkling skyline and the quiet strength of a man who had endured and triumphed, the story concluded not with bitterness, not with regret, but with the enduring truth that the heart, when strong and patient, always finds its way back to light. Thank you for watching.